currently affixing things to the.
Okay, so we've done the Sean warm up. You're completely riled now
I know.
after the last 30 minutes conversame, ready to go.
And now it's like, and now I got to bring it back.
Right.
Bringing it back.
No, that wouldn't be any fun.
That's right. I'm like just making sure we got everything good. We're good.
Yes,
Yeah. Bringing it back, calming down. We both know it's not going to take much to get me fired up again.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, I think so. A couple things. One, I think we were talking briefly. I do want to talk today, explore to go deeper, even though we don't have our Vision Pros here, which suddenly I'm like, I actually find myself kind of missing the.
So I don't think we caught this when we were recording last week. I need to go back and check. But when we took them off, there was that weird moment.
It was so It was after we had stopped recording.
It actually felt like we were in reality with the headphones on and the headset on, and you sort of take the headphones off and you thought, "Where am I?"
Yes,
I want to put them back on.
It wasn't unpleasant.
Yes.
But it was very bizarre.
Yes.
And for people who don't know, so like when we sit in here and we record our podcast, normally, we have headphones on. Which aren't just for looks, like they're
right. So we can hear each other.
We can hear each other very well. And so there's even just this, when you take your headset off, your ears sort of hear the room again, because inside of our cans, you don't hear the room.
We're in Modem Futura world.
We're in Modem Futura land, baby. Hey, that's a good idea. We need to market like some virtualized world where this is Modem Futura land.
This plays into where I think the conversation will go.
I think so. Exploring more tiers of virtualized reality.
Yes.
So one, you have this effect when you're in. The same is true as if you ever spent time in like a sound booth or something where your ears don't hear the environment, they just hear the sound that's being created. If you do that for a length of time and then remove them, it is like you sort of walk, or you've experienced it if you've been in a concert and then walked outside, you're like, ugh.
Suddenly in a different reality.
Yeah, it suddenly feels or a movie theater and you walk out and it's like bright middle day and you're just like, oh my God.
Right.
You have some of these similar effects, but what was very bizarre last time we recorded, because we had our Vision Pro headset, so we had both the headsets on and we had the audio in.
And so for an hour, that was our reality.
That was our reality. Yeah. And I do say it was quite glorious. And as I'm sitting here now, I'm like, I mean, this is fine, but I'm like, I'm kind of missing.
You want to go back?
What it is, honestly, the biggest thing I feel right now is I'm missing. So I've got my little page notes, which everyone knows I have to go like this.
Yeah.
I'm missing that just being this massive, like 9-foot tall thing right here that I could just scroll through.
So there was a little snippet of that in the video from last week, but you really didn't get the full effect. That while we were recording, you had all your screens sort of around you in virtual space.
In virtual space, and it's really cool. And I find myself like that, but that's that stickiness of some of that environment and that experience that kind of stays with you. That you're like, oh, and I know I get the appropriate amount of of grief for how I watch videos through it. Right. I will say the family is usually already asleep before I tune the world out.
It's not, you've got the family on one side of the room, you got Sean with his headphones and headset on the other side of the room.
You could paint a really sad picture pretty quickly, but
I would say just for a fraction of a second, I felt diminished. I felt somehow I'd lost something that I was experiencing just for a fraction as I took that headset off and the headphones off, which was bizarre.
It was very strange.
Yes.
And for me, it was like this dual tier. Like all of a sudden, I can't remember if we said this out loud, but I'll say it now, even if we did. But it was like this, almost like the film Inception, where it was like, how many layers deep are we? Because it was like headset. It was like, headphones off. It was like, that's one reality.
Yep.
And then it was like headset off. It was like, oh,
yes.
And now we have another reality. And you're like, how deep does the rabbit hole go?
Right.
Tell me, Neo, how deep does this go?
So this is where you're going to have sort of the movie, if it hasn't been done already, where sort of you have the people wearing the multiple headsets. So every time you peel off one headset, you're actually still in the dream.
Yeah. And it's like that nested doll.
You can never get out.
That's right. Where you're like, it's just one layer. And then, and funny enough, it does beg the question. And I think, at some point we do need to wrangle Riz and bring him back in here to talk about simulation hypothesis.
Because he'll just shrug his shoulders and say, you're just in the simulation.
Yeah, he's like,
you've just moved from one to the other.
That's right. He's like, well, duh. You just went from one layer to the next.
Yeah.
But it was this bizarre moment where it was, because I think I was joking when we were putting that on. I was like, it feels like we're going diving. And it kind of was, again, it felt like we were coming out of different worlds. And it was like, there was one world and then here was another world.
Yeah.
And I had never personally experienced that dual tier world removal or whatever.
And it absolutely is. It was the headphones that were absolutely sort of central to that, because you are fully immersed with eyes and headphones. You are in a different world.
Yep, completely. And it was wild. Like absolutely wild. And I'm like, I haven't, because I was watching stuff last night in my head and using my headset last night. And I don't think we mentioned this in that episode too, the audio element of those headsets is phenomenal without any earphones.
Yes,
headphones.
yes. It sort of directed sound straight into your ears.
It's sort of, if you think about sort of like that, almost like bone conduction sort of happening at your temples, but it does a phenomenal job without anything actually over or in your ear, which you can augment with, AirPods or like what we did with just even traditional headphones. You can whatever. But yeah, it's funny because even when you spend time in that, when you take it off, you just have the one layer.
Right.
And so it's not that big of a deal. But that dual layer it really threw, in a good way, it threw me. I was like, wow.
You're going to have people listening who are thinking, they're slipping. They're going into this sort of dark side where they're not going to be able to extract themselves.
I would say two things.
The cult of augmented reality. Yes.
So one, that's not entirely untrue, because ever since that moment, I have been thinking about it, which is
why... You've been trying to replicate it.
I've been trying to...
You've been there in your room trying to sort of put everything on.
I'm like, I must get back to this state of pure immersion.
It's going to be the rest of your life trying to reach that spot again, that experience.
What happened to Sean? He went nuts. He was trying to chase the...
He just went.
He was already nuts. He just went.
Right. If you're listening at home, don't do this.
Be careful. Because I think, one, I'll tease this up and we'll come back to it, because I was very much the inspiration of, I've been thinking about that for a week, because I want to continue some of that conversation today. But also like that idea of, so you bring up a fun piece, which is sometimes there's the fun of going deep into some of these really mind-bendy spaces.
Yep.
You do, in some ways, like metaphorically, need to have a tether back to reality, right? And again, I was thinking about...
It's called a spinner. Don't you remember the movie?
It's your token. What do they call it? Like a token or something?
I can't remember the specific. Yes, but it's the thing that... Totem, yes. The thing that allows you to sort of tell the difference between reality and the dream.
And then really question, does the top fall?
Right.
Because the movie cuts, you don't know. But it is. And so it's kind of fun. I mean, even I was talking with a group of students, earlier in the fall when we started, because again, for a lot of these students, this is the first time they had gone into like this space of futures and scenario development and stuff. Yep. And I'm like, you can go, and we had a lot of fun with this, with world building, all these kind of things. You can go into these really fun, interesting spaces, but also like, what is your totem? What is your reality? Check to make sure that as you are kind of losing yourself in these layers and layers and layers, is how do you work your way back?
I know. So I love this. So we probably ought to sort of skip to the actual opening from the cold opening, because this could go so far. But I am just going to throw in that we're talking about virtual reality, but this applies directly to working with AI.
Oh yeah,
I think so. That and I wish we'd have had this conversation before we wrote the book AI in the Future Being Human, because that idea of a totem that keeps you grounded in reality as you get sucked into the world of AI, I think is so powerful.
Well, that's what. Well, maybe I'll write the compendium to it. Right?
There we are. Yes.
Read this first.
It's going to be the totem edition.
The totem. Well,
the book becomes the totem.
That's it.
This is.
Or can we build in? some cool? I'm like, okay.
Anyway, we got to get on. Because this is distracting.
Now we're franchising, right? Oh my goodness. Well, I see no better place to just take a hot pause and then jump back in.
Okay.
All right. Well, I am Sean Leahy, joined by my, I think, real co-host,
Andrew Maynard, possibly.
Possibly. Where's your totem? Which means this, of course, is Modem Futura, the show that explores the intersection of technology, society, and the possible, probable, and preferable futures, asking deep questions like, what will it mean to be human in the future? And what does it mean to be? So as we were teasing, I have been thinking, and maybe too much, about the virtual worlds.
Yes.
So broad term, the metaverse, in the sense that, you know, we talked about it last time when we had our Vision Pros on, and thinking about, you know, again, how does spatial computing differ from things like virtual reality? But really then I started continuing that thought process, both from a technological perspective, but then also just, again, even from sort of a experiential or philosophical experience too, of what does it mean as we are, because the technology is becoming viable, what does it mean for us as humans as we progress through time and as things go on, our ability to kind of move in and out of these different sorts of virtualized environments, mixing with our, you know, what we could, I think, agree is our shared physical reality. But, you know, because I think up until, you know, very recently, those have been very discretely different experiences, right? You were in the real world, or your version of it. And then if you had a technologically mediated experience like a VR platform, you know, software, headsets, whatever, you could have those also very discrete experiences. Now, they're already nested within our embodied reality, but they're very discrete. And I think what's interesting, and I think the Apple Vision Pro in our episode last time was really a fun idea to explore and consider, is the way that those technologies are merging the purely sort of augmented, you know, virtualized reality and the real world. And and then, you know, and I've got lots to talk about in terms of like the way I kind of see these things, both in terms of the tech, but also as a potential, but really kind of, I think so. And then your comment here in the cold open about applying this to the AI thing is, I think, and our tethers to reality. How do you know? And we've posed this in different ways before, but it's that question too of how do you know how do you know the fidelity of the things you're experiencing?
See, that's it. And I just thinking for a little bit about AI and sort of getting into sort of the psychology space. You think about how you construct your understanding of the world around you. And yet we tend to think, yes, we touch it, we hear it, we feel it, but that is at just one surface level. We actually construct it in our minds, and we construct it through sort of stories and how sort of we apply the signals we receive to our own internal mental models of what the world is like. And of course, when we're interacting with AI, say it's just through text, although it gets even more profound when you look at audio and video. But even with just text, it's like reading a book where, as you read a book, you are immersing yourself into a world where your mind is actually constructing that world. So this is actually a form, reading text is a form of virtual reality if it is done right. And so as we interact, we're actually being pulled into a world which isn't the physical world. It's a virtual world that is being created by the AI and our interaction with it. So even there, you've got to think about where is your tether to reality as you get pulled into these conversations and these relationships. Because they're not just a conversation. They are actually these stories changing how you perceive and understand the world that you're immersed in.
No, absolutely. And I think, you know, it in some ways, right, it's one of those elements that, like, as anything in your environment starts to, like, you can't extract one's self from the environment, right? And like, because
you get back to media and messages and things.
Absolutely. I mean, all right, everyone, put your philosophy hats on, folks. This is gonna be good. Smoke them if you got them, or you know, chew them if you got them. I don't know, because so again, right? Like when you ask. And there's lots of fun ways to explore this too, which, you know, we do through sci-fi stuff all the time, right? A classic example that you can use is something like, cloning, or even so let's go Star Trek with like the teleporter, right? Beam me up, Scotty kind of thing. If you are dematerialized and rematerialized, are you the same person?
Right.
You can even do this with age, right? This is a fun philosophical question, right? Because we have this identity of where you're like, well, I am me, and I have been me forever. But have you?
No, yes.
Right? Like the 10-year-old version of yourself, and I'll use myself, right? So I'm in my 40s. The present day version of myself am I actually the same person as
I was?
was?
This gets into memory. So the only way you can sort of say there's continuity there is because you remember all those previous steps going back to an earlier age. But that assumes that memory is accurate, an accurate representation. But of course, we know that's not how memory works.
Yeah.
Your memory is a reconstruction of sort of data that sort of gives a sense. So memory is always being sort of renewed and refreshed.
Sure.
So. And of course, people have written about this and talked
about
it.
There's a lot of you have some fun going into that.
There's the illusion that you are the same person, and there is a thread there through this constant sort of vitalization of memory. But actually, you're changing every second.
Yeah. And so there's that question, right? Like, are you the same person?
Right.
And because I think we carry this sort of numbed idea of like, of course,
yes,
of course. But then when you start
it's a temporal resonance of the essence of Sean going through time.
Well, and it's not the first time I've said this before. And this maybe we'll save this for like when with Riz or somebody is back here too. But it's like, but then there's also that terrifying notion of when you wake up, when you lose consciousness, right? So that thread, that throughput, right, does get interrupted every night.
Didn't you know that every night when you're asleep, false memories are planted into your head, so you wake up believing that you've got this past?
Yeah. And who's to say they're not? But what is crazy is like that is that terrifying again, and these are thought experiments, right? But as you start to peel them apart, something that you just always was like, well, of course I'm the same. I've always been me and blah, blah. But then when you start realizing, you're like, well, how do you know? How could you know with certainty that those memories are in fact the ones that they are
the ones that you went to sleep with.
The ones you went to sleep with. And how do you
this is what friends are for, to convince you if they exist. If they're virtual friends, you've got a problem.
See? And then and again, you start what I come back to is then you start asking the question was how deep does the rabbit hole go?
I know. So you immediately got me thinking about ChatGPT gaslighting you. So, so of course, GPT memory, you wake up and you go back to GPT and say, I've got memory switched on. Just remind me, who am I? And it tells you. How do you know it's telling you the right thing?
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, like I said, I've been having a lot of fun with this for a while. But also coupled with just, the life of a parent with two small kids. I've short hours of sleep, all this kind of stuff. I'm like, even yesterday.
Wasn't it 3?
Oh, yeah.
No, sorry.
Wait a minute.
What happened to that part of my memory?
Yeah, weird things, right? You start, yesterday I looked at my watch and I swear it said a different time. And then I'm like, wait, was the watch gone? Am I losing it, man? Where's my totem? I'm losing it. Yeah. No, but again, because what I was thinking about with this that I think is really interesting. And I will say, so when I'm going to throw out the term metaverse, not to be confused with Facebook now turned Meta.
Yes.
And they have a platform.
Metaverse in the broader sense.
In the broader sense of it. I'm curious, Andrew, from your perspective, if you so for me, the origins of the term metaverse, to me, that comes directly from Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, which is a novel, 1992, 93?
No, maybe
91?
a little more than that, but it's 1990s.
1990s,
yes.
Early 1990s, where I think that book, because that didn't really exist. I mean, there's been other like virtualized stuff, but never in a way where it was like...
You can sort of track threads back to the idea, I think, from other authors, because of course it didn't come out of nowhere, but that was the first book that people tend to remember that captured this idea of this sort of virtual digital reality, that there was part of this sort of broader sort of universe that was actually sort of constructed. It wasn't just the physical one, but it was also constructed through these sort of digital sort of systems.
Right. And I think in the key here, when we think about, so just to set it up, because I want to explore what I'm calling it as the stack.
Yes.
But to set it up, this concept of a metaverse, right, is, and what sets it apart from, like, again, if you're thinking just like Facebook, Oculus Rift, because, famously they spent a gazillion dollars on changing their name from Facebook to Meta, which big question mark on how that's going. I don't know. We can talk about their shift, their shift there too.
Yeah.
But the difference between this metaverse, and if we go all the way back, I forget which episode Riz was on. He talked a little bit about this as well, because there's are examples of things in the past, like Second Life and things. But the key with this sort of like broad perspective of a metaverse is that this is a persistent and shared 3D virtual world. So, and you can think of that as like network of networks, right? So it's not just Facebook's, their platform version is just a piece of the metaverse. That no one owns, quote unquote, owns the metaverse. And if you can think about, I think I was just coming back to Ready Player One. You did not like Ready Player One, correct?
Correct, I didn't.
Okay.
Neither the book nor the movie, I'm sorry to say.
Double barrels. Well, but if
sorry, Ernest Klein.
Okay, I enjoyed it. The movie not so much, but the book was I think for me, this is a total aside, but the book itself was just such a nostalgia trip.
Oh, you're right.
That I just lapped it up.
Child of the 80s and 90s.
You know, I just everything was described. I was like, yes. Exactly. But if you, whether you like or dislike that book also does a pretty good job of exploring this concept of the metaverse.
See, that's right. Yes.
In the sense that it is a pervasive, persistent, virtualized world that everyone sort of can come into and go into. And you know, it becomes so big that it is not something that gets turned on or off necessarily. That, you know, different companies and organizations have their little versions, or they have their add-ons or their experiences, what have you. But that's not
centrally controlled.
Not centrally controlled, or at least, you know, that's the big conspiracy theory, right? Is then of course someone's going to try to take that over and do whatever. But in concept, that's kind of what we're talking about.
But it is this idea, and this still actually blows my mind when you think about it. It is this sort of overlay of physical reality that we have actually invented and created as humans. It didn't exist before we started to do this. So this is 100% human created. It is, the universe, in the small sense, is the right term, because it is a multi-layered overlay to physical reality that we can actually exist in and interact in ways that both parallel the physical universe and physical reality, but also in ways that extend that, augment it, and completely transcend it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, so again, as I was thinking about this, and when I was thinking about, you know, when we were wearing the Vision Pros, and then of course, you know, what people probably by now understand too is like, when we're done with that episode, I live that episode again for quite a few hours.
You were just caught in that loop.
Because I have to edit the audio, I do the video, I do all this stuff.
You know, there's a movie called Mindstorm where exactly this happens. Somebody replays sort of memories in their mind and they just can't get out of the loop. This was almost you. I'm glad you broke out.
I'm going to need a kick. You know what I mean? The good thing, total aside, is I have a big bicycle race coming up this weekend, which is like 50 miles pretty much uphill the whole way. So if I survive that, that'll be the perfect reset for all this.
Yes. It'll ground you.
That's right. One way or another. One way or another. Gravity will do its job.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But when I was thinking about this, you know, kind of going through it and listening to our conversation, what I really started getting interested and excited about was this idea of, because I think one question that is pervasive is like, well, where is it? Where are we with all this stuff? And I think, you know, for me, one of the ways that I've been approaching this is thinking about, again, this sort of permeable barrier between physical space and these virtualized spaces, whether that be, and again, so kind of thinking about it in this like stratified layer of both technology and with that technology, the sort of interactions or environments that technology can afford. And what I mean by that is, so if we take the bottom layer, the deepest layer, that's the full nerd helmet, you know, whatever that could be present or in the future. I mean, again, if you go to things like Ready Player One, you have like these entire like haptic suits with all this stuff.
Full immersion.
And even today, you can find places that have these really interesting applications with like the rolling floors. So, you know, it's basically, think of like an octagon treadmill kind of thing, where with all these like ball bearings. So as you walk in place, but it feels like you're actually
walking.
So you can have this like the deepest level, like going down into those levels of reality, the deepest layer where your entire environment is completely virtualized. And again, from that, you know, we've seen, you know, science fiction, whatever, we have lots of examples at these different tiers, and what that can be, and the different kinds of interactions you can have with real or completely generated individuals, which that alone is a really rich vein to explore, because it is scarily difficult to sometimes ascertain whether you're talking to a human or not. Even video games have gone, I'll try to look it up. I don't have it on the top of my head, but a video game that is due to come out, I think in 2026, was making headlines because of their use of procedurally generated worlds, which just means that these things are not predefined, that they are created by the game and the game engine in real time. But also with that is so in video games, you always have all these NPCs, these non-playable characters. They're the people that make up the background. There's the shopkeeper that you talk to get a mission or a quest. What they've done is that those characters are all given lives. So they, they are these synthetic personas that all have their own character, that are all procedurally generated.
Which is actually where you get to sort of the simulation theory, where you ask the question, am I an NPC?
You're
right.
Or are you the player amongst all of these NPCs?
Because that's exactly where we're going with these gaming environments.
And, and of course, that's the fun part is when you get to simulation theory is like, once you can clearly define that we have built the technology that can do that, the assumption then is, well, that proves you are in fact in a simulation, because if you can do the technology to make it happen, then
somebody else might have done it to you.
Yes. And so you're just nested down. And there's a great Rick and Morty episode about that.
That was sort of a side
So that's
exertion.
That's the deep version. And then we have all these different layers on top of that. So you have things like pass-through headsets, like the Vision, like the Vision Pro, like the Oculus. Microsoft had their version for a while. I forget what that one was called.
I'm going to say
HoloLens.
Yes.
HoloLens.
Though it wasn't pass-through, because that was projection onto reality. That was augmented reality. Yes.
And so you kind of like work your way up, and then you have things like the devices that you hold in your pocket, like a smartphone or whatever, which through the camera, through whatever you can
get that access.
You can interact with. Again, you could see through into a virtual world. You could interact with virtual objects, as you might see. And then going up even further to what I would call like the lightest touch would be like either headphones. So things that are just able to communicate sort of gently to you, or even glasses potentially that are truly augmented reality, in the sense that you have an information overlay of the real pass-through, not something that is mediated by camera systems or something like that. And so what I find interesting is that you have this you have this stratified set of both technological layers that also have their different affordances. And so that, to me, this idea of the metaverse becomes layers, not a place. And so, or in my mind, I was also thinking about it again, because using like the dive helmet analogy, that it's like the ocean. How deep? How you want to stay on the surface? Do you want to go in a submarine and go all the way down? And being able to, again, fluidly with that is also go in and out and sort of go in and out of existence of those different tiers seamlessly.
Right. But what I find fascinating here is it's actually so hard to find metaphors, because this is actually something new. So the metaphor I was thinking about is actually sort of using different wavelengths of radiation to see things. But even that doesn't work. So for instance, I'm seeing you using visible light, using my eyes. I could use different sensors and you would look different. I could look at you in terms of ultraviolet or infrared or X-ray or whatever. I would get a different layer with everything I use. And of course, this is how we use telescopes to sort of see the galaxy. So again, that's different layers pulling out different pieces of data. But even that doesn't get there, because that doesn't get to the sophistication of your layered sort of metaphor or analogy. So there is something here where we're trying to capture this idea of there is this sort of interactive, sort of interoperable sort of layer, incredibly complex layer of stuff that we've built in digital space that is superimposed on reality, that we can interact with in different ways, we can manipulate in different ways, we can connect with reality in different ways, and then that begins to slowly get to the richness of this idea of the metaverse.
And I think, to me, that was the part that was getting well, it gets exciting, right, to think about that, because I've often, ever since we've had the ability to create some like VR and mixed reality. So oftentimes you'll see this written as XR, right? Extended reality, which is basically the catch-all terms for anything R. So AR, VR, MR, all these kind of things. But there's this, and there's been a lot of work, going back the last 10 years, which has been really interesting, of people creating things, for example, in a augmented reality space, but anchoring it in the real world with even just GPS coordinates.
Right. Yes.
So that, like, if Andrew created some piece of like digital art, it's be invisible to the human eye.
Yep.
But if you were to come to that same location with a technology, a phone, a
whatever,
headset,
you can actually lift it up and see that.
And there it is.
Yeah.
And so like what fascinates me as a space is this, again, this existence of this almost shadow world, if you will, that is this digital version that is in coexistence of our shared physical reality. That again, if you want to or need to, you can experience that virtualized world at different layers of depth, right? And I feel like that opens up this incredibly new, like weird way of thinking about things.
But there's something really interesting here. So mentioning those digital artifacts that you can see using extended reality, that's been a thing for a while. And if you think back to COVID 5 years ago now, there were people who were doing this to try and give people an extended experience.
Yep, absolutely.
It has never really taken off, apart from in niche communities. Same with Pokemon Go, which was a massive thing for at least 2 days, maybe a little bit more than 2 days.
It's still going.
I know people still play it. But this idea that you have this overlay that you can only see with the right technology. But none of these things feel as if they've really taken off. And it's really interesting to ask whether that is simply because people aren't interested in that overlay or whether the technology isn't there yet. And one of the things that I suspect is we simply have not had the compute power to do this at a level of fidelity that feels natural until now. So, and this is an interesting offshoot of AI, because we're not talking necessarily about AI here, but AI augments this. We're talking about the massive compute ability to be able to recreate or to create this sort of this virtual space in real time with high resolution. And because of the investment in AI and compute power, we're now beginning to get to the point where we can do this in other ways.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think it's interesting because I think that one, the observation is 100% correct, that it hasn't had the same like momentum and steam. But I think, and this is again, we'll see if this prediction lasts the test of time. Those tend to age like milk. But I think the dark horse here with that is like, there are so many pockets of fractured versions of this. What is missing, one, I think you hit one of them, is the compute power. But the other thing that's missing is the throughput. The thing that will coalesce your ability to move between these layers seamlessly. Without that, it is very fractured, because then you're like, headset removed. New device
you
on.
Have to the amount of effort that you have to put in actually creates a barrier.
And that's going to be for those niche audiences, because that's someone who really is like, I have to have that experience or whatever. But I mean, I even think about from like the video game layer. So people who are familiar playing like these massive open sandbox style games, if you're you or your kids or anyone who's under the age of 30 that who's playing Minecraft, for example, you are living in a virtualized world that you are constructing. If you are playing or having these other experiences, if you're living online through platforms like Roblox, or you're having all your communities things through Discord and all these other things and blah, 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 blah. These are all abstracted, virtualized experiences that are at present fractured, right? So the way I think about it too is like you have this layer, and it's not easy to go between them. You have to take transportation, if you will. You have to. I'm trying to think of all these metaphors. Like you got to take a spaceship from one to the.
We haven't got the meta infrastructure there yet.
And you have them all kind of fractured, but we're already becoming very accustomed to coexisting in these spaces. And so the AI piece is, I think, massive in making that step of how will we be able to start to move through these these layers more seamlessly. And I think I think AI is one of those pieces, because I mean, as you mentioned, one, the ability for these systems to procedurally generate content environments is, I mean, we're talking full-fledged 3D immersive, high resolution.
We should say exactly what that means for people that haven't experienced it. But I think you were getting there. This idea that you can be in a virtual environment and you can look around and it looks solid, but actually what is being generated is just what you can see. But the AI, as soon as you step beyond that, it can in real time extend that reality. So a reality that didn't exist before you took that step is now constructed by AI. So it feels seamless. It feels like you're in an infinite reality, but actually it's being developed and generated every step you take.
So, I mean, even just if you can imagine in your mind's eye going for a walk, like in virtualized environment, going for a walk in the woods, right? That the woods have not been pre-rendered yet. extend like 10 feet in front of you. So as you keep taking a step,
you're going to have so many people having an existential crisis saying sort of next time I go for a walk in the woods, do the woods really exist? Or is it only what I can see that exists?
There you go. I told you. Smoke them if you got them, pal.
right.
Because that does raise that question. Like if you can't perceive it, does it exist?
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Well, there's a lot of philosophical books on the shelf that can tackle that one for you.
I know. Yes. Yep.
But you end up in that. But so you start seeing these weird connections between the virtualized space as when we start thinking about, and this is one of the things that I love about just technology in general, I will say is like, as we are thinking about from a technological perspective, how do we do this thing? We start asking that question of, well, wait a minute, how is this happening for like, if I'm able to create something, to simulate something, how do I know that has not been done to me?
Right.
Or how does this work?
Yep.
How does this work with the wetware, the squishy parts?
That's right. And actually, I've got to sort of bring in now Ex Machina, which
sure.
I've already mentioned. We watched as a class a couple of weeks ago. But one of the things in Ex Machina, for anybody who hasn't seen it, is you have the human protagonist, but he is so sucked into this world of AI and the robot that he is caused to question his own reality. So there's one scene where he actually cuts himself to find out whether he is actually real or not, because he is so immersed in this environment that he's been placed in.
Yeah.
And I think this exactly the same begins to happen as we create technologies that can replicate our experience of reality. We begin to doubt what is real and what is not.
Yeah. And it goes, and I would say that also spans, I mean, taking a pause for a second, that also expands to just in terms of just our observable universe, right? I mean, are the best telescopes that we have, we can reach out and we can estimate that the sort of the edge of the sphere of our known universe is what, 13 billion years, or give or take a few, but we can see nothing past that.
Right. Yes.
So the question is that a wall? Is that a boundary? Are we just inside of another black hole? We have no idea.
Right.
What we do know is what we can observe and those laws that we can observe, but who's to say where those are contained within?
So we don't know. Infer, and of course that's the basis of physics and the science of actually sort of developing these theories. You observe and you infer, you develop these sort of rules, these laws that can predict. But yes, that's all, as long as it's self-consistent, we're happy. But what if we are in a constructed reality?
Yeah, and does that, and then that always comes back, right? I mean, this is also sort of like the defense of, this is the tether back to reality in some ways. Right. So if anyone's listening going, oh my God, I need some rope. So this would be one of those pieces. And this is kind of like where we often get when we talk about like the simulation hypothesis. If we discover, oh yeah, it is all, so what?
That's right.
What are you going to do about it?
Because we call this reality. Yeah. It doesn't matter sort of how it's constructed. This is our reality that we live within.
That's exactly it. It's just another way of defining the world to which we live, right?
And actually, a really important thing here, and this actually goes back, I think, to our conversation with Riz. Yes, you can sort of construct these hypotheses that everything is simulated around us to a level and a depth where we just can't tell the difference between reality and simulation. So yes, you get back to the point where you say, well, this is how we live. But somebody will always say, if it's a simulation, surely we can manipulate it. The problem is, if that simulation is so sophisticated that everything we know about the physical world actually is part of that simulation, we know that there are rules and laws that simulation has to follow, which means that it's effectively unmanipulatable. You can't just change something. You can't just suddenly say we're going to change the speed of light.
Yeah.
Because everything falls apart. The whole simulation collapses then.
Yeah. Someone turned off the machine.
That's right. Yeah. So it's actually quite delicate.
Sure. Yeah. And I think maybe that's the piece too, is like, you know, a participant inside the simulation couldn't change it, but doesn't mean someone externally couldn't change it.
But even outside, yes, they could. But anybody that's constructed models knows that you can't just change one parameter and expect everything to stay the same. I mean, that's the way to kill a model.
That's why you have the multiple worlds theory. That's because again, I mean, coming back to that, right? I mean, if you can have one, you can have infinite.
Yes.
In terms of that. So it's like,
as long as you got the computer.
That's right. As long as, you know, some alien, ancient alien civilization has got the compute. You know, I like, in some ways you like to think that, okay, maybe we are just burning someone's graphic
GPU,
card.
yes. We're all just living in one huge, ginormous GPU.
That's right. That's right. Oh my goodness. See, okay, now this is where we climb our way back.
Yes.
Right?
So
but see, this is what happens. This is what is so fun about this, because like you start going, you're like, well, we're really down here, and then it's like, all right, let's climb back up.
Yes.
But one of the things, so again, with this idea though, coming back to that stack.
Yes.
One thing that I think is really interesting about that is, again, we have these technologies, and even just going from like devices, right? We have helmets, we have phones, we have connected devices, and so much of our world around us is becoming more and more connected. Even going back to the World Economic Forum, one of those top 10s was like the connected sensor systems in cities, right? So thinking about, again, that we're sharing this physical space with things like Waymos and what have you that are, autonomously driving vehicles. We can have buildings with sensors. We can have roads with, again, this physical layer that is simultaneously transmitting and existing in a virtualized layer.
Right.
And then being able to interact with that in just ways that you could see for very specific reasons. Could be transit, could be what have you. But then also, I mean, again, the part that I get excited about is when that, or I should say not when, but as that virtualized world builds up in all of its different instantiations and different pockets, the potential, like the unlimited potential of our humans to figure out new and interesting ways to interact with with each other, through these devices, through whatever, hopefully in the aim of the target, I would say, of like increasing human flourishing. But to me, that is this really powerful potential space that doesn't exist at present, again, fractured in bits and pieces. But as we start going forward,
the potential there.
There's the potential. And again, leveraging the technologies like the power that's possible from AI, and also just the compute we've learned from AI, being able to provide those pathways where those virtualized environments can become persistent.
Right.
And I bring this back because, as I was mentioning earlier, I'm missing, I feel a loss of having my virtual screen up here. But
you just want to pull it back up.
I know. And I don't want to put the headset on. I just want it to be there, right? And so I need some retinal projection from somewhere. But so when we were sitting here, I had constructed my own little setup in here. And then went home, put it back on in my home office, and I sit in my chair where I normally sit. I put this thing back on, and all of my stuff, not this stuff, but all of my stuff from that version, is it because that device has learned over time. It didn't do it originally, but I think it's learned over time that it can anchor those experiences to where it is positionally and where your Wi-Fi is and all this kind of stuff. That is incredibly powerful.
Right.
And what I find is, I'm like, again, when I take that headset off, I still want that thing to be where it was.
That's it. So now effectively what you're describing is you create this virtual world and you can see it with a headset on. But what if you could see it if you just held up your phone? So you could use your phone as a viewing scope to sort of look into this world, or you put on those glasses and those give you access to it, or you put your headphones on, you're immersed in the soundscape. So this idea of persistence now becomes really compelling and allows you to interact with it in multiple ways. Again, it's going back to the diving analogy. So you've got the ocean there. The ocean doesn't, when you come out of the ocean, it doesn't go away. It stays there. You can still sort of dip into it in multiple different ways and immerse yourself in multiple different ways.
Absolutely. And it's like, and this device builds this environment. So looking, picking on the Apple Vision Pro for a moment, right? It builds this virtualized environment. Even staying within the Apple ecosystem, for example, it's no secret. I've got an iPhone, and I'm wearing the catalog. But like, and we had mentioned before, I'm one of those people that I often will wear my earbuds all the time. And I don't put them in to like avoid stuff, but usually I'm doing something and I'll just leave them in for a while.
It's an aural overlay. It's actually identical to what you might think about as the glasses.
Absolutely. Yes, and so for example, if you you can see it in the clip from last time, I had put a poster from music. It was a baseball poster. Even if I'm in my headset, like if I know that poster is there in the virtual world, can I not just go over to it and have it say, "Would you like me to play your baseball poster?" I'm like, yeah, of course, or whatever, because what I'm envisioning is this ability for us to continue to be able to continuously interact with these environments to the extent we want to. right? Because we talked about, if you have that horror, someone puts I think it was from one of our Futures Improv episodes, right? Like, so you get a horror module installed.
Somebody hacks your environment. Yes, yeah. But with all of this, and I love this vision, and I love the fact that we're developing technologies that make this possible. But one of the things that worries me is persistence, because it requires energy and infrastructure. So you think about this table in front of us. Its default mode is persistence. You don't have to constantly keep on recreating the table for it to exist. If the power goes off, if everything else goes away, it still exists. With these virtual worlds, you pull the plug and they disappear. So you've got to keep on providing the energy. Not only the energy, you've got to have the infrastructure. And the infrastructure can't be controlled by any one entity, because then they could pull the plug and everything goes. So how do you get that persistence, which requires energy and infrastructure and distribution of responsibility and authority?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge question, because I think at present, the way you do it is you just keep burning more fuel, right? Keep those data centers humming along.
We've got a great big sun there, maybe.
Well, right? I mean, I forget what the actual numbers are, but it's one of these. I feel like it's one of those. This one of those statistics, when you hear it, is sad. Because you're like, more energy hits the earth during the day than we could ever possibly use. But we don't capture any of it. We do some, but not nearly enough. But that raises a huge question with that persistence. And I would extend that beyond just our virtual world. That just extends to our, moving beyond what that means in terms of this like metaverse analogy, but also that's just our digital world. Again, we've talked about it before. When we need, and there's an episode coming on Internet Archive and the challenge of preserving our knowledge and information in that exact way. Because same thing. What happens to all of our collective human knowledge, experience, the art, the science, the art, the conversations, the history? What happens to that when it is predominant, when its default storage mechanism is essentially digital. Ones and zeros?
That's exactly it.
Either magnetized or otherwise. What happens when that goes away? And how do we keep it? Because it is not written in stone.
And so what fascinates me here is we're talking about digital sustainability, which
that's
thinking about this
term.
I actually think this should be part of the study and the practice of sustainability. It is not, or it is no longer, I would say, just about the physical world or the biological world. It is also about the virtual world. And I suspect that is going to come across as incredibly controversial. But if we live and survive and thrive in this augmented world, this metaverse as well as the physical world, we have got to think about how we actually sustain that in exactly the same ways as we think about sustaining the physical world. And if you say that actually the metaverse is inconsequential to our physical and biological world, I think you're missing something fundamentally about what the current world is like.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that's an incredible question because, again, it comes back to this idea too of, how can you entrust the fidelity of these things if you don't understand what is the plan? How is it kept? Where is, again, because similar, and the other piece that is sort of there, and it's, the excitement of all the other pieces sometimes overshadows it. But again, if you think about those personal spaces that I'm building, that's also a reflection that there's a privacy element of that, right? Of like, what does Andrew build? What does Sean build? How are you using that space? How are you interacting with people? There's a level of privacy to that as well,
of course,
which then it raises that. It's that same question. What happens and where's that balance between the technological capability of giving you what you want? Someone's got to pay the light bill to keep the server farms going.
So actually, let me ask this. Now having put out that controversial idea, without thinking it through too much about, we've got to think about sort of metaverse sustainability. How far do we push this? Because if you look at the physical world we live in, over thousands of years, we've developed these social systems and processes to ensure that we have some semblance of understanding sort of what personal space versus sort of community space means, what personal sort of ownership versus community ownership means, governance structures, everything. They've evolved over time. They've faced challenges. We've got through those challenges. And we've got a system which it's still deeply flawed, but actually life is functional. But if the metaverse is so important. If it is not just a trivial add-on that we can just switch off and everything will be fine, and I would argue that we are so ingrained in digital systems that we simply cannot do that. If you switched off now all digital systems, the world would be in absolute chaos.
Yeah.
So we've got to take this seriously.
Yep.
If this is the case, how do we build these similar systems that have taken thousands of years in physical space to the level of robustness that is necessary for the metaverse to actually work and lead to human thriving in the long term?
Yeah. Well, that's vote for Modem Futura.
Right.
I think this is a perfect example of when it is, I mean, especially with this consideration, never has there been a better time to employ futures thinking and these methodologies, right? Because for it to exist, it should be clear, it should be transparent. Again, all these things are needed to be talked about. The danger, right, is that it's never planned for.
Right.
And we continue this fractured moment until someone does a power grab and says, okay, well now if you want to do this,
and
now
that's it. We're actually at that point in human history where somebody could, and companies are already trying to do that power grab.
Yeah.
I mean, you just look at Meta. They actually called themselves that name, claiming that we are going to be the company that controls the world in which you live.
Yeah, they tried to do a snow crash, never heard of it.
Right. And again, it comes back to this point where it's easy to dismiss this and say, oh, it's only digital. It's trivial. We ought to not even be thinking about this. And yet lives depend on it.
Completely. I mean, even in today's level, I mean, if hospitals, I mean, you look across the board, I mean, cybersecurity is always one of these spaces that's interesting. But and of course, there's the criminal layer of it and all this kind of stuff, which is it's its own mess.
Which mimics reality. Or I've got to be careful with how I actually sort of use words, because this is reality, but it mimics the physical world, almost sort of step by step.
Bank robbery. I mean, everything, right? But if you look at it, you look at the real world damage that cybersecurity crime and things happen, right?
Yes.
So, what was it? Land Rover? Was that the automaker? It was Land Rover.
I didn't hear about this.
Oh, it's Jaguar. Right. One of these. I'll have to double check. They were out of production for at least a month and had to borrow money. I think it was from the UK government to pay bills because of they had gotten bitten by this cryptocurrency hack that they completely had decimated their ability.
Couldn't deal with.
Hospitals, right? This happens all the time with organizations where a bad actor is able to, in extent, like hold hostage their entire digital presence, to which, without paying the hostage taker or the criminal who's doing this, they're left in a position where they cannot operate. And that includes hospitals. That includes and you can think
and again, this is very much a part of the metaverse, because you have these criminal organizations working in this digital overlay in ways that are not visible but are incredibly impactful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so again, it's one of these, it was Jaguar. I was right. It was Jaguar and Land Rover.
It was a yes.
I guess they're all one. I guess they're all one company now.
I think they are.
That's why. Okay. But Jaguar,
the British auto sort of industry.
They lost their entire.
Wow. Yep.
They could literally their factories could not manufacture because everything is digitally controlled. Yep. All these sophisticated robots on the assembly line couldn't operate because of this.
Yep.
So it's incredibly complex. And that's kind of, I think, a couple of points that I would make, I think, to kind of bring this more, because again, this is the futures happening real time, right? Is we can envision these scenarios and we go, oh, well, this would be interesting or this would be terrifying. And then start unpacking that. Well, what happens? What do we need to understand? Where do we need to go? What decisions do we need to start thinking about today to make sure that we don't end up in some hellscape, whatever, or that all of the world's knowledge isn't held hostage by one conglomerate, greedy company or something.
Right.
But how do we think about this and how do we take actions about this? Because so often this is what happens, that these signals, these things build up over time and then they collapse when they get to a tipping point where something is able to put into perspective. And if we're caught unaware, sometimes you're caught flat-footed. That's where you can get these massive power grabs. And so right now, I mean, think about the controversy and the conversations around AI and how they can be unfair and biased and all this stuff. Now think, if you had the chance now to go back 10 years ago and start talking about, well, we need to make sure it doesn't do this.
Right.
Like that's
well, some of us were actually.
Well, it's true, but not enough, right?
Right. I mean, it didn't gain traction.
It comes back to this sort of like, unattributed Chinese proverb of, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago.
Right.
The next best time is today.
Now, yes.
Right. So you can't go back. We're unfortunately we're kind of stuck in a one-directional time arrow.
But at least you can start when the questions are asked.
You can start today, and you can start thinking. And what does that mean, right? You can start thinking about it. You can start voting economically with where you put your money. You can start voting literally in terms of people in policy and things like that are thinking about these spaces or these ideas. Because the other piece here, and as we think about it in more near-term reality, right? So as of today, with our AI systems that we have access to, with the the platforms, the social media platforms that are driving like Meta and the Facebook /Metaverse stuff, versus other platforms, the Ray-Bans now. We talked about the social implications and behavior of that's a new signal that, instead of holding up a phone, I keep looking for it. But instead of holding up a phone, just having a conversation, now you have to start questioning, like, am I being filmed? How do I know?
That's right. Yes.
Am I comfortable with this? But you have all these layers. And the one thing that is another piece that I think fits directly today, right in this, is also this idea of sort of like the digital permission creep. Right. So how often is it when we sign up for a social media platform? I mean,
yes.
Who reads the terms and conditions, the T and C's? Most people just go zing.
Yep.
And sometimes they have the audacity to say, "Oh, you clicked I accept too quickly." We watch, and then of course you just scroll to the bottom and then click the thing and it lets you in
because you need the thing.
You need the thing, or you want the thing. And also that's another conversation of just the humans being difficult and putting the We'll put the information there, but you have to have an actual Juris Doctorate to understand it.
Right.
But you click on those things, and so you give permission to this one platform. But over time, again, thinking of those layers, now that same platform has different layers in this, this blended, virtual and physical reality. Do those permissions have the right to expand into these spaces? Because, of course, the maker of it.
And who is going to oversee
and
this?
Who's going to oversee that?
Who determines it? And if you decide to push back, what do you do? How do you take them to court? Is there even a court that will actually sort of deal with this?
That is exactly. These are the questions we can be asking now. Because, again,
that's it.
When you sign up for a social media platform, you're like, yep, click, whatever. Does that mean now that when that platform, we can even use retailers, right? If you were a Walmart customer or whatever, and you shopped online, you did your stuff, whatever. And now with Walmart and ChatGPT, you see, again, maybe you never saw those types of connections happen,
right.
But they are. So now your privacy, your things that were in one location now potentially are in more than one.
Right.
Did you approve that? And how does this work?
Everything you're saying here, it's just compelling me to believe that there is study and practice here which is desperately needed, which doesn't exist. So it exists in pockets. So people that work in cybersecurity, some of this will be deeply resonating with them and say, yeah, we've been screaming this from the rooftops for years now. Nobody's been listening or nobody pays attention. But it's only one slice of the pie. Yeah. And there are many others which aren't being covered. But as soon as you see everything in this context of the metaverse, these sort of layers of overlay sophistication, which are incredibly essential to the world. So we're building sort of this amorphous infrastructure where without it, the world as we know it cannot exist.
Yeah.
And therefore we have got to take it seriously. And we've got to start asking these questions and working out how we navigate this. And the one thing we cannot afford to do is say that this is immaterial because it's not physical and it's not biological. Right. My words are sort of dissolving here into the metaverse somewhere.
Where's your totem? Where's your totem?
But this is actually the thing that scares the life out of me from this conversation. What we've discussed is the reality we're living in. And yet most people are blinkered to it and claiming that it's not important, that other things are. And as soon as they do that, it creates a great big open space for somebody else or some other corporation to step in and make decisions without any permission.
Yep, exactly. And that's I mean, I hope people are sitting up, right? I mean, I'll literally sit up and be like, oh my gosh.
Yep.
But that is exactly it. And so it changes also, you know, I think how we think about the permissions we give to these platforms, right?
Yep.
So like one idea is that, as this world continues to become more and more digitally enhanced, again, regardless of which layer, like maybe you might know someone who they'll never go past that very surface layer because they just don't want to.
Right.
They don't want to. They don't need to. They don't want to. And so they experience that's the limit, right?
Yes.
Other people will go all the way down. Who knows, right? All this kind of stuff. It's a spectrum of use across that.
Yep.
But this idea of those permissions should follow the individual,
right? Yes.
Not the tool or the platform.
Yep.
Right. So that as they sort of, if you think about that, it's like their own, sovereign privacy rights.
Which I absolutely agree with, but there is a huge complication here because that individual sort of exists within a whole ecosystem, and that ecosystem is being built on the assumption that those permissions are given.
Yeah.
So as soon as you begin to pull those permissions back to the individual, the whole ecosystem begins to sort of crumble or at least be stressed.
Yeah.
Which is also a huge call for intentionality in how we actually build these, because if we don't have that intentionality, you build incredibbly fragile systems.
Exactly. And and I think the long tail of time will show things will come and die, because there'll be these corrections, and just like everything, right? That you will go too far on one side, that'll come back. And
That's right. Yes.
And over time, this will kind of settle out.
But then the trouble is, so that is exactly how things work out. But then you've got to ask the question: how many people are going to benefit, and how many people are going to suffer on the way, and how many people are we okay to allow suffer as we go through these oscillations?
And those are and again, those are the exact questions of why we need to start applying this way of thinking about those. Because it's a fool's idea to assume like, oh well, no one will, if we just do it my way, no one will get harmed.
Right.
That's ridiculous. But there is, and again, there's this balance of when we're navigating that, of being able to stay grounded in reality, but also then be able to take a high enough viewpoint to say, okay, we know there's going to be harms. And then with that, right, it's not trying to pretend that there's never going to be harms. There always are.
Right. Yes.
The question then is taking the responsibility to do the best you can to mitigate what those harms might be, knowing that, like, yes, when you make a new technology, there's always harms. When you make anything, there's always harm somewhere, right? Whether that be the environment.
That's where the responsibility comes to actually sort of work out how you navigate
this. That's it.
And it's always negotiation. It's always compromise. And it's always a collective process, because society as a whole has got to decide sort of what price is worthwhile for the progress that you get.
Absolutely. And that's where you then intertwine with that intentionality of care.
That's it. Yes.
And that's where also the transparency needs to be, right? So that as we're thinking about this from a global policy perspective, right? Because again, it's not, one of the challenges with anything digital, which this is not a new challenge. We know ever since we've started creating and existing in a virtualized digital environment, they have no boundaries.
Right.
It's not like the paper physical place where you can say like nothing gets past this street or this wall or this building. The physical boundaries don't play by the same rules.
That's right.
And neither do ideas, cultures, and ways of communicating.
That's exactly it. Yeah. So I love the fact that we started off with a very simple conversation about headsets, and now we're looking at sort of both existential crisis but opportunities with this new world that we are already well on the way to building. And actually, this is what I love about these conversations, because I hadn't started thinking in this depth about this beforehand, but now I'm actually beginning to think that we need to be way, way more intentional in terms of how we think about this meta overlay to the world we live in. And if we ignore it and if we don't integrate it, we are heading for a whole load of hurt.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that's also, this is why this is so much fun. Because this is what we do, and this is what happened. This is none of this was pre-scripted, other than I have like one line on here. I have one line on here about talking about it as a layers.
There we are. It's the human AI prompt. You're the single prompt, and you get all of this coming out.
And you get this. But again, I think what is so fun about this is that you can see the complexities and how quickly they sort of mount up to understand, like, this is not, even when you can give a simple answer, that when you just like the question of reality, the minute you start peeling that question apart, you start to go, well, wait a minute. Wait a second.
What I assume was right actually might not be, which is why you need, what do you call it?
The totem.
Yes.
So find your totem.
The tether back to whatever reality you choose to accept.
That's right. I think for today, mine's my coffee mug. Right. And also giveth the sweet, caffeinated coffee.
There you are. And actually in your own reality, you're then happy. You don't care whether it's really real or not. You've got your coffee.
We know the rat will just keep pushing the button.
There we are.
You know what I mean? You keep getting that dopamine hit. It doesn't matter. No, I think this is incredible. I think we can probably hit the brakes.
We probably
here.
should. Yes.
I think the batteries on our headsets are low. Someone's got to recharge us. I don't know. But right. I will tease this last bit for a conversation later, because I wrote a piece years ago thinking about this again, this virtualized interplay between physical and virtualized reality. But then think about that in terms of educational spaces.
Yes.
Because I wrote about this a long time ago about having a physical space that people could come to, but completely it has the ability to augment itself towards the learner.
Right.
Because you can't do that physically with everybody, because you physically can't change a building 500 times in a second. But the digital version can. And so if you think about these virtualized spaces that are also in a shared physical space, but you see not necessarily the same things that I see and all these kind of interactions, and you start to layer this, how exciting that becomes.
Bunch of kindergartners with their headsets on and their...
who knows? Maybe it could be one of those things. You're going to have to get a license to go to certain depths of the metaverse, right?
It's going to be the sort of the futurist version of giving a kid an iPad. You put the headset on and that's it.
That's right. Or at some point,
that is not a way we want to go.
At some point, you don't want the headset. Just like the Matrix, you just have the little port.
Plug them in.
Just plug me in.
Talk about dystopia.
Oh my goodness. Well, I hope all of our listeners are join us in reality. Right. But again, I hope everyone enjoyed this show as much as we did. My brain is absolutely just firing right now with all kinds of ideas. And I look forward to my my mountain climb on this bicycle. I have a lot to think about.
Yes. I hope gravity is your friend and not your enemy as you do that.
I anticipate it'll be my enemy on the way up and my friend on the way down. Okay. At least I'm banking on that. So I'll if I'm here next week, you'll know it went well.
Right.
But this has been absolutely fantastic, and a call to action to people who, if you've been listening to this, if you've been inspired, if you've been maybe you're shouting at your radio, you're shouting at your stereo, or shouting at YouTube. Let us know what you're thinking, but also again, if this is catalyzing ideas or conversations, please share the episode with people that you might think like it. Help us. You can help get the word out by subscribing, following, whatever the platforms allow you to do on your favorite podcasts, Apple, Spotify, wherever, YouTube, of course. And if you could leave us a rating and review wherever you get your podcast from, because that is how the best way for the algorithms to share our show with people who have never heard of those people who have not heard of Modem Futura. But we would call for that, our sort of Modem Futura. I want to say army, but that has too militaristic terms. Community, that's a softer one.
Yes.
To help share and spread the word, because this is fascinating conversation, and I absolutely just have been just loving the feedback from different members in the community coming from all over the place. We have a massive international audience, and that is just incredibly powerful. And so just help us spread the word of Modem Futura if you can. That'd be wonderful. From what, as best I can tell, the real version of Sean and Andrew. Thank you for staying with us, and we'll see everybody on the next episode of Modem Futura.
We'll see you then.
We'll see you somewhere.
End transmission.